wants to start?
What are still the biggest question marks you still have to have answered as you head into the summer?
Yeah, I still, as much as anything and as good as, I really felt like we've had a great spring. There's competition across the board, and I think that we've had more guys push the needle to become the best they possibly can be than we've had. But until you get under the lights, until you're really getting put in those game-like positions, I think it's hard, in where you're talking some guys at receiver. You're talking some guys at defensive back. Until they have to own that position and own the reality of it, I think it's hard. So, we'll keep pouring into those guys and keep watching those guys push the envelope. But I'll tell you, at those positions, maybe more competition and more guys really rising to the top.
Is there any clarity at running back?
Yeah, so many of those guys have real playing experience that, I almost, and this is not a knock against David because he was such a great player for us, but those are guys like Kane, who's finally healthy, and I think he's had a great spring. Sheldon, it's been great to see Brees Hall. I think he's from 1 to practice 14, made great strides. So, Johnny's been limited because, he got fixed up in the winter, but he's out there, can do non-contact stuff. So, those guys are veteran guys. I trust those guys. I think it's some of those other positions that I'm still waiting to see. But I'm really happy with that group. I thought that group's had a great spring.
What's the coaching been like for the offensive line? Just talking to different guys, it sounds like there's been a lot of sets of eyes down there with Jeff and Tom and you. Everybody.
Yeah.
What's gone into the evaluation of that group and its growth, kind of?
Well, to be honest with you, the main set of eyes is the most important one. That's Coach Myers. And I'll be honest, I really feel like that group, by the midpoint of the season last year to the end of the season, made tremendous growth. You even look in the bowl game, and you obviously we take some of the false starts out of it, physically imposing their will on somebody. It's the first time we've done that since we've been here. And you hope that that's the growth. You got guys that are juniors, and now they're going to be seniors. And I really think the growth that group's even made in the offseason in January and February. We're bigger, we're stronger. We look like what a real offensive line looks like. And that part's exciting. And then to watch that's the group that's kind of the leadership group right now in terms of, what we're doing, how we're doing things. That's fun to watch again. I feel like I haven't seen that for 4 or 5 years. And so, I think that group's really grown immensely. And a lot of credit to Julian, a lot of credit to Kniffel, 2 guys that have been anchors and starting a lot of games here and playing a lot of good football. And, I think Colin Knowles had an unbelievable spring. He's really made great growth, which you'd like to see. He had to play a redshirt freshman at center last year, and I thought for the most part, that young man did some really good things in his growth. You've seen in his confidence after a year under his belt. Really fun to watch. Colin Olsen. But then you talk Trevor Downing and you talk Joey Ramos, and now all of a sudden you're like real competition. Rob Hudson's had a transformational winter in spring is what I would call it. So, there's a lot of competition there right now, and that's going to play out into the fall camp. And, when there's real competition, you got to come every day to fight for your job. Then all of a sudden you see real growth, and that's what we're starting to get down there. And a credit to Jeff and a credit to that staff. But, he's done a great job with those guys.
How much has your 5 guys, your 5 starters, how much have they practiced even this spring?
Yeah, a lot, Randy. Because
okay.
In my opinion, we still got work to do. And as much as I do feel like we pushed the envelope at times last year in a positive direction, I still feel like there's growth to happen. And part of that is playing and getting those reps together. And you got to remember, Colin Olsen just came into the mix. Kind of 4 games into it, and now we've moved some guys around and we've tried some different combinations out there together, and that's fun to watch and see. And those guys have gotten a lot of really good reps, and we've tried to be smart with some of those guys that played a lot of reps as well.
In however many years you've been a coach, have you ever been satisfied with anything, though?
No, and that's probably not the case. But I think what you begin to see is how close are we to reaching our full potential. And I think some areas you're much closer than other areas, and that offensive line area certainly. I'm not hiding it. That's an area that hasn't been where we wanted it, or close to where we wanted it until really probably I felt like at times in the mid part of last year. And I'm not saying that's perfect. We still got areas to grow, but I think we're finally getting a lot closer to where we want to be in those areas, and in the tight end position as well.
What is it about Brees that made, where you saw those biggest strides from, like you said, the first practice to where he is now?
Well, you should be you should be going probably, on a date to Pizza Hut, with your girlfriend, and instead you're out there, and all of a sudden Ray Lima's at nose tackle and Jaquan Bailey's at one end and Annie's at the other end, and all of a sudden you're like, holy smokes, that's my first day of practice. And I just think gaining confidence and poise and just feeling the game, and that's a position where, if you can run the ball, you can run the ball, and I think all of a sudden you saw him gain that confidence midway through the spring and really have an understanding of, offenses aren't that different, but learning the terminology from high school. No, you know what, that means the same thing in college football. Cool, I can get it, and feeling confident in what he's supposed to do. I think that's the biggest thing you saw in Brees, and you saw him really kind of get his feet under his ground midway through the spring.
You've talked about Brock after the first practice, the leadership.
Yeah.
Anything you want to see from him? Have you seen that?
Yeah, he's special. He's one of those guys that it's really fun to watch great quarterbacks start to take ownership of their craft, and Brock's beginning to do that in a lot of ways. And from a complete understanding to what we're doing to, continuing to develop with some of the things that Coach Manning was able to bring from Indianapolis, and just giving him complete ownership in what we're trying to get accomplished. It's fun to watch that. And is he a finished product? He's not, but man, is he a guy that here's a young guy that had success. Will you go get better? And he decided to do that, and that's been really fun. And not just Brock, the rest of those quarterbacks. I think Real's had a really good spring, and John Kohler's another guy. Again, from practice 1 to where we are today, practice 14, a lot of growth. So, that's a fun room right now, and that's a room that all of a sudden now you were kind of really worried about what was that room going to look like, and now all of a sudden you're like, gosh, we're excited about getting to fall camp with this group and see where this group can go.
Coach Manning talked about multiplicity a little bit. We've heard the running back talk about catching the ball in the backfield. How much are you guys trying to do different things, and how much could the identity of the offense continue to evolve going into the season?
Well, you guys get sick of me saying multiplicity. I feel like you guys make fun of me about that every once in a while. But, again, offensively, it's just like defense. Like the reality of creating matchups within your offense is really important. And where we haven't had some of those pieces that we could really create real matchups with, tight ends, multiple tight ends, backs, multiple backs that can go into games and do different skill sets, multiple offensive linemen. There's a lot of things that we've wanted to do, and I think we've continued to evolve a little bit every year. And, again, it goes back to players, formations, plays. Who are they, and how do you create some advantages for yourself to be successful? And so, we certainly got some of those pieces, and I think it's been fun to be able to put that jigsaw puzzle together a little bit. Now you take what you do this spring, and that's what's really fun about. Now we're getting into this spring and summertime where we as coaches can really say, who are we as a football team? What are we? And how do we become the best version of ourselves we can be? So, it's been fun to tinker and do some different things. It's going to be really fun to sit down and watch it and say, where are we going, once we get to the summer.
What do you see from depth at linebacker? Because obviously, Mike, Marcel, O'Ryan and Jake to a certain extent too, but just kind of filling out that three-man group and then having some depth behind them.
Yeah, I felt really good about that group going into spring ball, and today I feel maybe better about it. I think Will McDonald, I said this, I think he's a special football player. He's a difference maker in a lot of ways, and trying to find a proper fit for him and what we do defensively, and shaping our defense to what he can do defensively. I think that's been really fun to watch develop and grow. Chandler Paul Vermacher, I think, has had a really good spring in terms of what we wanted to get out of Chandler. Gary Vaughn's another young guy that's had flashes this spring, and then you throw those four guys in. I think very similar to Brock is what you see from Mike Rose. I think Mike Rose is a guy that easily could have took his foot off the gas and said, man, I had a great fall, but now he's 240 some pounds, and he's running downhill, and he's confident, and he's taking great ownership in what we're doing on the defense. So, it's been a good spring for those guys, and I think that's a group that they're going to be fighting for playing time, and it's what you want. And how I feel. I'd love to have a two deep on that defense that all those guys can play, and I think that's an area we certainly feel that confident going into fall that we can have that.
Jaquan, we've seen him hobble around. What's going on there?
Yeah, so Jaquan kind of tweaked his foot early in spring. Jaquan will be full go here in the next 2 weeks, and a lot of it just precautionary from our end of it, and so he he got dinged up, but he's done a great job of kind of staying engaged, and nice thing for him, and certainly lucky for us that it's nothing serious.
Longer around this. What about Meeker? Was it Meeker?
Meeker, yeah, Meeker, same thing. Meeker, I want to say, the end of the first scrimmage dinged up as well, and again, nothing that's been major for us, and it's been good because it's forced other guys to get in and us to be able to move things around. But Bryce was back at it today doing some non-contact things, so we're fortunate.
Sorry, how are things looking at wide receiver in the context of you lost arguably the most talented receiver the school's ever seen?
Man, I feel like I had to answer that question a year ago, and so, the reality of it is we think there's some really talented guys there, and when you start talking about that, you talk about two guys that have proven it, and Tariq Milton, and obviously, certainly what we've been able to do with him, and he's a guy that in a lot of ways has shown a multiple flexibility. And then you certainly talk about DeShante, and he does a lot of great things. I think those two guys have been, what I loved about those guys is they've shown great leadership because there's so much youth and amongst the other guys, but the competition between those other guys, and Sean Shaw, Joe Skates, you talk about certainly some different guys that have risen to the occasion, and you know what? Great competition breeds some success, and that's been really fun to watch. That really group continue to develop. Landon Akers has done some really good things as he's coming back off of an injury. So a lot of competition there right now, and really fun to watch.
What would it mean for this program next weekend to have two players drafted, somewhere probably between the first and third rounds?
Well, I think first it says a lot about those young men, and I think both those guys, from Akeem Butler to watch his growth from year one, and sitting in this meeting and saying, man, this guy a year ago, most talented receiver we have in our program and I've ever coached, to watch him continue to come into his own, it was really fun to watch. And now putting himself and his family on an amazing stage to have great success, that's exciting. And the fact that we get to reap some positive benefit from, Akeem developing in this program is exciting. And then David Montgomery, I mean, I don't know if this program can say enough about what he did to give back to this program in terms of his work ethic and what he did, and really now put himself in a position to change his family's lives and his life forever. So, both guys at the end of the year, one of the best two players at their position groups in the country, and now they're gaining the result of it. So is it great for us? Yeah, that's great that Iowa State becomes a name, but more importantly, when you know these young men, you know their background, and you know what they've done to get where they're at, it's really rewarding to watch them chase their goals and dreams.
With Brock last year, when he first came in, how much was he going to maybe his first read, whereas later in the year he was becoming smarter and smarter and going through stuff, and how much now does this spring give him to, how much have you noticed him, just his knowledge of the game?
Yeah, and I'd love to sit there and say, man, there's plays Brock makes, and we're watching the Oklahoma State game again yesterday, and I don't even know how he makes that play, and so, Brock's one of those guys that there are some people that were put on this earth to play quarterback, and I feel like Brock's got that intangible and that, work ethic and innateness that he shows up when it matters most, and he's got the ability to see the field, and I think he's like David in a way. David had elite vision, and he always had elite vision. Well, I think Brock's the same way. He's got elite vision. He has a great feel for what's going on, and what's now fun is to give him command of what's going on, and I think that's where you've seen the greatest growth, even in him during the football season. He got to second and third, fourth read in game one we put him in, but where he became special is you saw him take ownership in things, and you saw him, maybe have a bad play, and he'd shake it off. He already forgot about it before he got to the sideline. He was ready to go on the next one, and that's what you mean about ownership at that spot. You got to be a pretty special young man to be able to handle everything that comes with it, and he's done that.
As you finish up the spring, what's your biggest message to the entire team of how to carry it now into the summer workouts and into the season?
Yeah, this team, there's not a big rah-rah speech. I think in some years you've had the plead of, hey, listen, it's going to be discipline. You're going to have to be great in the offseason. You're going to have to do those things. But I really do, and obviously we'll talk about those things, but I think we've got great player ownership right now. There's guys that understand what sacrifice you have to make from this end point to get to the finality of starting fall camp where you want to be to continue to take the next step. So I think that's the thing. If there's one area I'm really excited about is the player-driven leadership that's in our football program right now, and giving them the reins to take this football team and say, hey, the keys are yours now, and for the next 8 to 10 weeks, like, who we become is going to be what you're willing to put into it. So I think our kids know that, and I'm really, to be honest with you, I'm excited to go watch them continue to take hold of what they've already started.
How much have things changed in that aspect? It's from 4 years ago right now.
Yeah, I think drastically different, and it makes you have to rethink how you do fall camp. It makes you have to think how you prepare for game one, because with these new rules and us allowing to be, available to those guys at times, and kids are here all summer long. I mean, it's I think what we have to really be cautious of is not, overdoing it with them. I want them to be excited to come back here for fall camp. I want our coaches to be excited to come back for fall camp, and I think that's a great balancing act from my end. So I do think it's a little bit different, and I think that's a really good point.
I think there's a picture on Twitter of Brent Venables here. How much does stuff like that go on when you guys coaches go around and learn from each other? And I know you like to study different programs and stuff.
No, it's been really good. We went down there and went to some different places. They've been up here. I think that's part of the coaching profession. And if I've always said this, if you ever think you have it figured out in our profession, you're gonna get humbled really fast. And where our staff has been out to some different places, and it's been really fun that some other people have been here, and you can start to share ideas, and at least people know where Ames, Iowa is now, so that part's positive.
Is Coach Haycock going to need to hold that guy now?
Well, yeah, let's hope not, because I think Coach Haycock can snap faster than Coach Venables can, so that could be dangerous for the rest of us.
Was there a staff connection there? I mean, with coaching, everybody kind of knows everybody, but was there any specific?
No, not really. I went down and they had called to ask me to speak at their clinic this year, and did that. Got a chance to spend some time down there, and then a week later, some of their coaches came up, and you talk about culture, and you want to be the best. And I think for me, it's fun to see what the best are doing and how they're doing it. And so, really, that's kind of how that sparked. But there certainly wasn't prior to.
All right, Coach. Thank you.